Okay, well, I'm going to get us rolling now. We're a minute past, so thank you all for joining us today. This event is co-hosted by 3 different programs today at the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative, the Tribal Climate Health Project, and the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project. So we appreciate you all joining, spending your time with us. So we will start with a welcome, introductions, little overview. We'll run through current opportunities, and then we're going to be breaking out into 2 different sessions. The people who stay here in the room with me will be joining the Accelerating Tribal Fleet Electrification, Practical Strategies and Funding Pathways breakouts. That's going to be co-hosted by TECC and the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project. And then you will have to select to break out the Tribal Climate Health Project to join the Tribal Climate Adaptation through Environmental Protection Part 2, focusing on air and water. And then we'll spend the last 5 minutes reporting out, discussing next steps, and closing today's meeting. I'm Josh Simmons, co-director of the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative, also a lead consultant on the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project. Shasta, you want to introduce yourself? Angie?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Shasta Gaughan. I am the environmental director and the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Paula Band of Mission Indians. I was going to say Michians, just make it all one word, and the co-director of the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative.
Hi, Angie Hacker with Prosper Sustainably. We're working with Shasta for 8 or 9 years now on the Tribal Climate Health Project, and you'll hear more from us later.
Right, and then if you could, all the attendees, if you could introduce yourself, Shasta, your merging of words is infecting me. You can introduce yourself in the chat, your name, and what tribe or organization you're with. That would be fantastic. So a little bit about the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative. So there are 3 program areas under TECC: the Capacity Building and Technical Assistance Program, focusing on advancing the climate energy needs of the 25 TECC member tribes; Economic Workforce Development, focused on due diligence and evaluation and advancing of economic and workforce development opportunities on behalf of TECC tribes; and then our Policy and Regulatory Advocacy Program, primarily focused on participating, understanding, and providing training on California Public Utilities Commission proceedings and other matters of interest. And we do have a separate webinar series that typically occurs monthly. We skipped August, but we'll be resuming in September, and you'll from our email list, you'll get an update of that next webinar. And TECC's overall purpose is to identify and advance the climate, energy, and related economic and workforce development goals of SCTCA tribes, and through public events like this, really seeking to advance that on behalf of all tribes in the state. As I mentioned, this event today is also being co-hosted by the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project that is administered by the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay Indians in partnership with Paula and San Pasqual. Paula previously administered this under a prior EPA pollution prevention grant, and Viejas has one right now. Prosper is leading the implementation of this program that's providing some technical assistance evaluation, a variety of opportunities for Viejas, but it also includes this webinar training series. So there should be, I think, 3 or 4 additional webinars. We'll have some focused on water efficiency, conservation, some on hazardous substances and management, and other topics as well. Shasta, Angie, brief overview of Tribal Climate Health Project.
Yeah, so sorry, I had to make sure I was unmuted. So the Tribal Climate Health Project has been going for, I want to say 9 years at this point, which is scary. That's a long time. And we are still going. We're not going anywhere. And we are still working with tribes nationwide, but a lot of focus in California to help tribes build their capacity to manage and adapt to the impacts of climate change, and with a health spin to it, understanding that climate change impacts also have an impact on individual, community, and cultural health. So we hope that you join us during our breakout, because ours is the good one. But they're both going to be recorded, so that if you miss one, you can always go back and watch the one you missed. So you can make a choice, and you can have your breakout and breakout 2. All right, I'm just going to stop there.
We have the advantage of you don't have to click to go anywhere, so we usually get the numbers. Okay, so we're gonna do a quick run through of current opportunities and other assistance and events also as well. And then as we kind of go through them, if you're aware of other opportunities we've missed, please enter them into the chats, and we want to add them to our database and make sure we're communicating these. So first one, the SGIP energy storage incentives for low-income homes. This is for residential solar plus storage. I believe most of this money's run out, at least in PG&E, SDG&E, and Edison territories. But there may still be opportunities elsewhere. I don't know if Austin's on. If you have any insights into that, maybe you could look it up and drop that in the chat. But great opportunity. It just moved pretty fast. The Fast Charge California project, we actually have Center for Sustainable Energy here today to talk a bit more about that opportunity that's live right now. Grid Alternatives and Tribal Energy Alternatives has their energy plan grants. That is an open funding opportunity until fully subscribed for up to $50,000. The US DOT Build America Bureau has a rural and tribal assistance pilot program grants with a $20 million tribal set aside to get up to $2.5 million for infrastructure, presumably transportation infrastructure projects, but also other services. Cal Recycled Beverage Container Redemption Innovation Grants. This one just got extended a bit further. The energy infrastructure incentives for zero emission commercial vehicles, transit set aside funding. I feel like, hopefully CalSTART can share a bit more about this today during their presentation. I'm not too familiar with this opportunity, but assume it focuses on fleets and commercial vehicles. Bureau of Rec has some drought relief funding up to $2 million to protect water resources. There's the California Department of Pesticides Regulation, Sustainable Pest Management grants for up to $2 million for tribes and other organizations. The California Energy Commission just extended their Advanced Grid Technology Acceleration Projects funding opportunity to October 17th, which offers up to $12 million for demonstration projects. The Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives, Amplifying Unheard Voices opportunity for up to $300,000. The Native American Affairs Technical Assistance for Tribes. This is another Bureau Rec opportunity for water, protecting water and water-related resources. And another, this one I guess is focused on hydrogen and EV infrastructure. California Energy Commission for medium and heavy-duty vehicles that we're not going to necessarily cover today, but just be aware there's another opportunity for EV infrastructure. So that's the funding opportunities we covered. If you have others we've not mentioned you feel like are relevant to this group, there's a longer list. We kind of pared it down. Please drop them in the chat, preferably with links. And then there's a series of funding opportunities that have been paused. So the DOE's Energy Deployment on Tribal Lands grant, which had an NOI last January, still is sitting in limbo. I heard that it might be being released. Hopefully that is the case. Don't know what's going on with the 40101D grants. I'd be surprised if they came back, but hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised. Solar Community Assistance for Local Equity. I don't know the agency there, but another DOE, the ERA grants. I don't think that's going to come back, but wildfire smoke air monitoring response technology. And you probably all have heard the news about Solar for All funding, and that's probably gone unless some lawsuit is successful in recovering some of those funds. But the way we've been seeing that go, that's also seeming unlikely. A variety of events. So I want to just highlight a few. So the Tribal Pollution Prevention Conference held at Viejas on September 10th and 11th still has registration open. I'm going to drop this link in particular in the chat. or Sherry, you on? If you could drop that in the chat.
Yep, I will do that.
Okay, so yeah, we'd love to see you there at Viejas. This is going to be really a day-and-a-half event. So 1 day of sessions on the 10th, and then on the first half of the 11th, we'll actually be touring the microgrid at Viejas. And the Tribal Climate Camp. Let's see, what else should I highlight here? Well, I guess I'll name them off. The Energy Transition Summit, Tribal Green Summits, the Strategic Growth Council Prop 4 Q&A session. Interested just to hear more about that. Clean Mobility Equity Alliance Forum, the 4th Roadmap. Is that spelled correctly? I guess it is. 4th Roadmap Conference. And then featured to the 2025 Tribal Climate and Health Adaptation Summit hosted by the Tribal Climate Health Project. And so Angie or Shasta, if you could drop that in the chat for people to register for that as well, that'd be great. Hope to see you there too. All right, so we're ready for our breakouts now, and you should see an option to join the Tribal Climate Health Project pop up. If you do not join the breakout, you will stay here with us with TECC and the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project focused on electric vehicle funding assistance opportunities. But if you would prefer to learn more and to join the session on climate adaptation through environmental protection focused on air and water, please use the breakout to join the other room. All right, I see it popped up unassigned. Is there an option for, oh, I can assign people?
If you scroll down, you can find the TCHP room and then click join because we're cool. I'm going there. Bye.
Okay, yeah, so scroll down the list all the way and click join. Otherwise, you will be stuck here with me. All right, give it another minute. Okay, so we're gonna get going on the TECC and Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project focused on electric vehicle funding and assistance opportunities. So we going to have April Baldock, president of S-Curve Strategies, presenting on going through the process of planning fleet transitions, EV infrastructure, and fleet hubs. We have Felicia Lucas, Deputy Director of Affairs from CALSTART, presenting on the opportunities that CALSTART is managing or is aware of. And then we have Bailey and Luzita, I hope that I pronounced that right, from Center for Sustainable Energy, focused on fast charge California in particular. So I really appreciate you all joining us here today. And I'm going to turn it over to April now to introduce herself and dive right in. April, just let me know when to go to the next slide.
Great, sounds good. Thank you. Today we're going to walk through really a how-to guide for tribal communities pursuing fleet electrification and charging infrastructure and EV hub planning. And it's great to be here. I'm April Baldock, president of S-Curve Strategies, and I've spent, I think, the last 15 years in the EV charging infrastructure industry, doing hundreds of EV charging site walks and working on fleet electrification projects across 13 different states. But being based here in California, I've been driving electric since 2011. So I have a really good idea of what charging installations are the most successful, and I'm excited to share those best practices with you. So next slide. And the goal today is to break down the fleet electrification process into simple steps. So you'll walk away with a clear picture of how to get started, and then we'll cover fleet electrification, charging infrastructure. We have some key takeaways, and I've sprinkled throughout this how-to guide some pro tips that I've learned along the way, and I've provided you a slide that I think you have to, it's a must take a screenshot as a cheat sheet for some of your charging efforts. So next slide. And as we think about the benefits for tribal communities, fleet electrification, it offers many tangible benefits that really go beyond the vehicles into control over your energy independence and demonstrating leadership. And on the financial side, electrification can save tribes hundreds of thousands of dollars in fueling costs and maintenance really over that long term. And that's what fleet electrification does, is we're looking really over your procurement process as to how to make the best economical decisions for you. Next slide. So we'll jump into the 4 steps for fleet electrification. And for step 1 on the next slide is really focusing on fleet data collection. So every electrification journey begins with good data. And tribes can start by compiling a complete inventory of fleet vehicles. So for example, the number of vehicles, the type, the age, the mileage, the fuel type, how you're using them on a daily basis. And this baseline is critical to identifying opportunities for electrification. And next is really collecting the operational data. So how much fuel is each vehicle consuming? How much does it cost to maintain? Where are vehicles parked and for how long? The parking dwell times are especially important because they can inform your charging schedules. And there are many, many tools that can help you in this. So for example, there's telematic systems that can track usage in real time. There's fleet management platforms. But I think, in my opinion, really the key takeaway here is even just this part on manual logs. You don't have to have the flashiest system, you don't have to have the telematics. Really, what those that are helping to plan your fleet electrification efforts need is they just need the data. So if that's in a written form, that's great. We'll work with that. The VIN number, the type, the age, the mileage, all of those components are beneficial and really required as part of this data set. Next slide. So looking at vehicle replacement prioritization, not all vehicles have equal impact when it comes to electrification. And the next step is prioritizing which vehicles to replace first. So light-duty commercial vehicles, they're usually the biggest contributors to fleet emissions. And replacing those early provides you high return in terms of environmental benefits. I have here on a pro tip. So just the choosing the proven models for your tribe is also important. So starting off with those models that we already know can easily transition. In many cases, those are light duty models itself. Moving on to high mileage vehicles, that's another priority. So the more miles a vehicle drives annually, the greater the fuel and maintenance saving when converted to electric. And then finally, we'll consider operational criticality. So it's best to start with vehicles that are less mission critical, so not your emergency vehicles. And then one of the pro tips here is that one tribe that we're working with was starting with their light duty fleet vehicles first. And even though the local utility had a fleet electrification rebate for medium and heavy duty vehicles, what we found is that even starting off with light duty fleet vehicles, that they were still going to qualify over time for this rebate from the utility. So that's really good news when you're thinking, oh gosh, to participate in these rebates, do I have to jump into a medium duty vehicle right away? No, you don't. You can actually start out with light duty. So that's really good news for fleet operators. So jumping into the total cost of ownership, the financial case for electrification is built through a total cost of ownership analysis. So this means that you're going to compare, what's business as usual costs? What are the costs that we have from today? And then and around buying and operating, whether it's gas or diesel vehicles. And then comparing that against what is this electrified scenario going to look like over the long term, typically about 10 to 15 years. So you know that in that instance, you'll have some higher upfront costs because we're thinking about the procurement of the vehicles and installing the chargers, but also over time, these vehicles do tend to last longer and have much less maintenance. And that's where your savings is going to come in. And regarding incentives, so programs from utilities and state agencies, any federal sources, they can significantly reduce upfront capital costs and make this really competitive from the start. And when life cycle fuel and maintenance savings are factored in, the case strengthens exponentially. So for example, one tribal fleet has about 70 vehicles, but over time by 2040, the projections are looking at over $555,000 in savings, which is significant when you're looking at over time and what those costs are. All right, next we'll jump into what a sample implementation timeline looks like. So for example, this is actually taken from a real world tribal fleet, and this is how they thought through the process. Let's break it out into 3 phases. We're going to start in the beginning at this light duty installation phase. We're going to have low risk, high mileage vehicles because we've already gathered that data. And then we're going to use this time so that we're building in our staff experience. In phase 2, they'll expand into medium duty vehicles, such as those higher mileage pickups and vans. And by this time, more models are going to be available and the infrastructure is more robust. Then within phase 3, we'll focus on heavy duty and specialized vehicles. So this is including emergency response. We're going to require advanced chargers, further technology maturity. But by this stage, the foundation is really going to be set, and the phases will be rolled out to ensure sustainability, reliability, and growing confidence. And you can see there, the pro tip that we have for this is really do this phased process, but we'll get into this into a second. Even though you're phasing your vehicles, you really want to consider ahead of time getting that charging infrastructure installed up front and doing less phasing of the charging infrastructure because that will become more expensive over time. So we'll phase the vehicles, but less phasing over the infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So I do have a slide coming up that you should screenshot, and we'll get there in a second. But talking about selection criteria for chargers on the next slide. The first step is in community-wide charging infrastructure planning for site selection. We'll want to, is this the fleet plan? Yes. So for fleet parking patterns, you want to ensure that the sites that are selected, that that's where their natural dwell times are for extended periods. So that's where your installations should be, most of your installations should be. And then moving on to utility proximity, you want to install your charging as close as possible to where the infrastructure is, because that is going to cut your costs down significantly. So one of the pro tips that we have listed here is that for one tribe, by installing their chargers 200 feet closer to the transformer, they saved $70,000 in trenching and repaving costs. So this frees up more money for the vehicles and also for the infrastructure. In this particular instance, the charging where the trucks were parked were 200 feet back. They're in a chain link fence enclosure, but the cost of just having the vehicles park a little bit closer and still being in kind of this broader, secure area really made a big difference when it came into the funding side. And then just construction practicality, trying to avoid, ripping up these hardscapes that you already have. So a designer and a planner will be able to do this for you pretty easily. All All right, so looking at power and utility coordination, which is really this second step on the infrastructure journey, that once your sites are identified, the next step is really going to be to work with your utility partner. And what we found is that they are really eager to understand if you have any type of microgrid, any resiliency planning that's already being developed. Talk with them about that ahead of time, because that's really going to impact some of your cost savings. I used to work at a utility for 11 years, and back in the day it was like, oh no, microgrids, we weren't really sure how to adopt them into there. But as you know, just really the industry is becoming more sophisticated, and we want to see that resiliency built into each of your tribal communities' plans. And then around capacity planning, it's a critical part of the process. And some sites may need minor transformer upgrades, while others could require even new service lines capable of handling larger loads to accommodate DC fast chargers. So another pro tip is contacting your utility as soon as you start considering how you're going to go about your installation, because they can give you a lot of information as far as leveraging other fleet projects that they've worked with to help you streamline your process, and really, I think most importantly, to help you feel like you're just not doing this alone. And then on code compliance, so there's many different codes that you'll want to follow just to ensure make sure that your designers are following these codes, especially when we're dealing with these high power infrastructure. All right, so moving on to future-proofing infrastructure. This third step in infrastructure planning is really key, because rather than building, piecemeal of your charging stations, installing a full electrical backbone early is what we have seen is best practices. And that means you're sizing your conduit, your switch gear, all that equipment that is going to be attached to your charging stations, that you're thinking ahead as to what is the total amount of build out that you've had. And you're building that infrastructure, you're laying the groundwork, and you're not necessarily installing the charger on top of every single one of them yet, but you are laying that groundwork. And one pro tip is consider the charging needs of the entire community. So is it just the fleet that's going to be using these chargers? Or maybe do you have some residents that are going to be using the chargers? Is there members that are going to be using the chargers? Is there multifamily area within your reservation? Is there public charging? Is there a casino? So as you can kind of start to think through, looking from that 30,000 foot level as to what your needs are really helps in the beginning determine what the needs are for the entire community. And then your charger deployment, as I mentioned, it can be phased. So you only need to install what's needed for the vehicles currently in service. So you want to lay the infrastructure for all of it. But if you're only installing the charging stations on top of the particular infrastructure that you've laid, that helps reduce your capital costs up front. And then future-proofing also means designing for resilience. So integrating with microgrids, solar arrays, battery storage, provides you backup power and load management flexibility. And in one particular instance that I've seen is it's important to bring the right people to the table in the very beginning. So for example, a public works fleet team, maybe they're not working on the side where you're planning a microgrid. However, they are going to be the ones that are using the charging station. So you'll want to get those groups talking early on to see about that. All right, so when it comes to charging business models, this is the one that I think that you should screenshot, keep this in your back pocket, because this is really going to help you when it comes to understanding what types of charging models should you have. And I just wrapped up a 7-part training course for the County of LA and the California Energy Commission on best practices for EV charging site selection. And this really is one of these important key takeaways, is how to understand which EV charging financial model is best for you, because there's 4 main ways that you can structure your effort. So I put together this cheat sheet as a part of the training, and I think anyone who's considering it should understand really how these models work. I'm not going to go into this in detail because I know that you'll have that with you, but you can see across the top, we have the business model, we have what it's best for. So kind of what budget it's best for, what staffing level that you have it's best for, and then also the advantages and disadvantages behind each of those models. And I'll put a link in the chat that you can go to this particular training session of these 7 modules, because there are just so many links to resources around EV charging infrastructure that you'll be set when it comes to any resources that you need. And then next one. And this is really something I think that is exciting for any tribal community that's looking to generate revenue in a really interesting way, is around fleet EV charging hubs. So this provides you a way to partner in your community with fleets that are traveling near your reservation. If you have a piece of land that is located near kind of a higher trafficked area that can partner with fleets, this is really a good way to do those public-private partnerships where you can have fleets come and charge at your location. Because as we see fleets adopting transportation electrification over the years, they are going to need these charging hubs and locations where they can stop for a charge. And then what that does for you is it's really an economic driver. So it creates local jobs, it's procurement and contracting opportunities, and circulating investment within the community. So these broader benefits really help make the hubs a strategic community asset and not just a fleet solution. So lastly, just some of the key takeaways for this is following this step-by-step process and using the structured evaluation, infrastructure planning, and hub development to ensure success. And then funding opportunities exist today that make these projects affordable. And you can quickly capture the limited, rebates, vouchers, and grants that are available. And then just most importantly, that electrification supports your tribe's fleet transition efforts and clean air, energy dependence, and new economic opportunities. That really strengthens the communities while setting a powerful example of leadership and sustainability. And the last slide. And that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. You can always shoot me an email, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, April. I really appreciate it. Very, very informative. I'm going to now turn it over to Felicia.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
You're good.
Awesome. So my name is Felicia Lucas, and I'm the Deputy Director of Tribal Affairs at CALSTART. And I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the programs and resources we have to offer as a clean transportation nonprofit. So just a little bit of background on CALSTART. We've been around since 1992, working in this space, believe it or not. And when I started here back in 2020, we were just about like a 50-person organization, and we've since grown to over 200 people in the last couple of years. So this growth, I think, can really be attributed to our unique ecosystem of offerings and our ability to forge and maintain relationships across our 5 key areas of focus. So the first one that you'll see here is demonstration and development. So really think like pilot projects and new technologies that may be in the nascent stages. We really do help bring those new technologies to market. And moving down the line to the next one. Go back one slide, sorry, thanks. And then the next one here is data assessment and validation. So data, as many of you know, is very important for various reasons, as it helps us to make the most informed decisions for siting, say, an EV charging project, selecting the best zero emission vehicles that really help optimize time and routes for fleet owners and operators. And data really does help tell a story that then really essentially brings it to life. And then building on that data, that then leads me to my third bullet point here, which is market acceleration of technologies. And that, again, a little bit touches more on pilot projects and incentive programs, and the success of the Clean Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Project, which CalSTART has administered since 2010, just AKA HVIP. It's really led to other successful incentive programs outside of California, in states like New York, Massachusetts, and more recently in Washington. And then all these technological advancements and voucher programs are really not successful without the policy piece, since that really does help bind it all together. And a key component of that is getting funding and legislature support to really keep our mission going. And our policy team is a small and mighty one, but they really do help us keep apprised of state, federal, and regional policy. And finally, our over 200 members span utilities, electric vehicle service providers, cities, national labs, engineering firms, battery and vehicle manufacturers, and microgrid providers. And that really helps guide the direction of the market, as they're the ones who really live and breathe the industry every day. So leveraging their expertise has really helped make our organization stronger, and really has allowed us to give a lot of insight into this industry. Next slide, please. Now getting into some of the programs that we administer, which is why I'm sure most of you are here today. So the first one is Communities in Charge, which is for level 2 charging. The current funding wave is open, but it is particularly focused on multi-dwelling housing projects this time around. And the good news here, though, is that tribes are eligible for an additional plus up for a charging port. This has actually been one of the most popular programs for tribes as of 2024. So last year, this program funded 19 different charging projects on tribal lands, and that equated to over $3 million. So that's pretty cool. And the sister program to Communities in Charge is Energize, except for that it's specifically for medium and heavy duty DC fast charging infrastructure. It works similar to Communities in Charge in that it's a cost style reimbursement program, with up to 100% of eligible costs getting covered or reimbursed, which when I first heard that they made that change, I thought it was too good to be true, but no, it's a real thing. It's 100% of eligible costs. And the funding is currently closed for traditional Energize, and will likely open up again this fall. But I'll touch on it real quickly since Josh mentioned it. The transit set aside, that is still currently available, and that is if you have an electric vehicle, medium and heavy duty, you can apply to the transit set aside option in Energize, and that's still currently open. The next one here is CORE, and that funds off-road equipment. So think like tractors, construction equipment, off-grid charging solutions, and believe it or not, harbor crafts. So we had a ride and drive in Anaheim a couple months back, and there was an electric boat there on full display, which was pretty cool. And CORE is currently open for applications. And then finally, on the HVIP is our longest running program since 2010 for clean, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. This program has funded over 10,000 vehicles across California, with many of them being deployed in historically marginalized communities. And this funding wave is currently closed, but it will likely open up again later this year. Next slide, please. So I know this is a lot, and I try to talk fast, but hopefully not too fast. But we also have, on top of the programs that we administer, we have a ton of resources that are specifically focused on funding. And the one that I want to highlight here is the Funding Finder, which has over 400 programs for zero emission vehicles and infrastructure. It's updated very regularly, I think on a bi-monthly basis, if not when once programs become available. And the data, it also provides access to over $44 billion in potential funds. Believe it or not, that still exists. And yeah, it's really easy, just a simple 3 steps. And there's actually a specific call out in the tool for tribes as well. So that'll take you immediately to programs that that you'd be able to use and access. And then the last item I'll touch on here is the Follow the Funds. So we just hosted a 4-part webinar series, which was very successful. And we saw participation from over 414 different organizations. And we heard from air districts, utilities, state agencies, and where the future of funds were going to be for next year. And the series also highlighted success stories, stacking scenarios, LCFS credits and green banks to help finance projects. And if you don't know too much about green banks, those are actually really, really cool. So if you don't have any money up front, you could actually go apply to a green bank and it'll cover those charges for you until your say your reimbursement comes in, like for communities in charge or Energize, and you essentially get your money back. It's kind of like a clean wash. And the link to these recordings can be found on our Vimeo account. And next slide. So yeah, I think that does it for me, and I think I kept it under 10 minutes as I promised. So thanks again for the time, and feel free to shoot me any questions or an email. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you so much, Felicia. A lot of great stuff there. Are there any opportunities in that funding tracker you think are particularly relevant right now? I mean, I think if you're looking for a resident, personal rebate, you wanna purchase a vehicle before the end of the year, or sorry, before the end of September, but any specific opportunities that people should keep their eye on right now for infrastructure or for vehicles?
Yeah, I would say so. Still the with the going away of these, or the tax credit sunsetting, that's just super unfortunate. But I would say the if you're looking for vehicles, the CalCap program, I think that'll be in there. It should be in there. But that's one of those financing mechanisms for vehicles specifically, so not just infrastructure. And yeah, see, so yeah, Josh demoing the tool right now. I was supposed to do this. I'm just kidding.
It's in the links in the chat.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Let's thank you so much, Felicia. We'll hopefully have a few minutes at the end for questions, and I'll turn it over to the Center for Sustainable Energy team. So thanks again, Felicia. Okay, so I'll again turn it over to the Center for Sustainable Energy folks to talk about the opportunities that they're aware of and managing.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Bailey Muller. I'm a senior manager here at the Center for Sustainable Energy, CSE, as we more commonly call it. But for those of you that are unaware of our organization, we are also a nonprofit. Our goal is to accelerate adoption of clean transportation as well as distributed energy through the effective and equitable program design and administration. So we house many different types of projects and many different types of programs that have different focus areas all across the country. So today we'll only be focusing on 2 of them, but we do encourage you to go to our website to check in the details about any of the other opportunities that we house. So next slide here. So I am the project manager of the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program called Cali VIP. Today we'll be going over the Fast Charge California project, but as a little background of Cali VIP, it's been around since 2017. Many different projects have been released under this program. It is said to be one of the largest infrastructure programs in the country to date. So we're very proud of the work we've done, and we're going to continue to hopefully have additional opportunities communities that come up under this program. But today we'll talk about the Fast Charge California project, which has our active money. So we currently have this project window open. It opened on August 5th of this year. We have $55 million available across the whole state. And so previously in our Cali VIP projects for our 2.0, which was our second contract iteration that opened in 2022, the Golden State Priority Project were the previous two projects we released. Those two were focused on regional distribution, so they only covered 2 of the 4 regions. This specific project covers all 4 regions, so every county in the state is covered and eligible for this, as well as anyone who can apply. So it's not just for disadvantaged or low-income communities. Anyone is eligible. However, tribal and low-income and disadvantaged communities do get prioritized within the queue. So once you do apply, you get bumped up in front of any other application to get funding. And so one of the more important things as well, it is first come, first served. So as we are open, we have a window that you can apply until October 29th. But as people are applying, we are processing as they come in. So we do encourage any site to get their application submitted as soon as possible, just to ensure you do have that priority taken to your advantage. For this particular project, we only cover high power DC fast chargers. So we do have a minimum power requirement of 150 kilowatt or above. With that, you get one certain rebate for 150 kilowatt. And then if you go above 250 kilowatt for that charger, you get a different higher rebate. So that's how we structure that differential. But in order to become eligible, you do have to just make that minimum power requirement. We accept both CCS as well as the J3400 connectors for eligible connectors for this project. J3400 was a recent addition. We actually just added that this summer. So that allows a little bit more flexibility of the different type of equipment that people can select. And we did up the eligible costs to be up to 100% of eligible costs can be covered per port for the incentive cap. One important thing that is probably the hardest part about Fast Charge California project is our ready to build requirement. For this, we do require each site to kind of have some work and some vesting in the project before you apply. So you must have an issued permit as well as a final utility service design in hand in order to be eligible to apply for this. So if you have any sites that you're interested in, that's something that you should start to talk about getting those requirements started now. Depending on the utility, some of those processes could take a few weeks to a few months to get approved. So that's probably the thing that requires the first steps for each site to get working before they can apply for funding. And then because the J3400 connectors were a new requirement, we still are requiring each site to be minimum 50% CCS of that other connector style. So if you have any questions on that, we have a technical advisory team that can talk through the semantics of that kind of technical talk. But construction can start no earlier than July 8th. July 8th was our original application window date. Originally, we were supposed to open in July and then end in September, but we pushed it back a month in order to accommodate for that J3400 addition. And so we kept that construction can start prior to July 8th, just because we did make that change pretty late in the game after we made the announcement of this project. So trying to be fair to all the applicants that already had some crews lined up and their calendars all set for the upcoming months. So construction itself could not have started prior to July 8th. But obviously at that date, after that date. So anything that's starting now would be eligible. So we have a lot of more information on our website at calivip.org. We did host 2 different webinars this spring, and so we do encourage anyone to walk through those and get some more information. But if you go to the next slide, we have application assistance available. So I kind of teased this on the last slide when I said we have a technical team available. They are open and ready for talking to anyone about their sites or eligibility questions. So you can scan that QR code and it'll bring you to that form to sign up for this application assistance. But they are a team that's ready to talk through eligibility questions, understanding any equipment requirements, reviewing any of that tiering documentation, so permitting, utility design stuff, as well as the pre-review of your application itself. So we can set up all of those meetings with you and talk through any questions you may have. But that is what I have for this, and then I'll pass it off to my colleague Lucy to talk through the other program.
Thanks, Bailey. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucita Lutfi. I'm an associate manager with the Equity Engagement and Outreach Department at CSC. Today, I'll be talking about SDG&E's previously owned electric vehicle rebate program. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so this program provides a rebate when you purchase or lease a previously owned electric vehicle. You must have purchased or leased the EV on or after January 1st, 2024. Applicants can receive a standard rebate of $1,000, while income qualified applicants may receive an increased rebate of up to $4,000 through the rebate plus option. So it's one or the other. To qualify, you must be an active SDG&E residential customer. The vehicle must be a fully electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid, and it must be listed on our HOV eligibility list, and it also has to be registered to your SDG&E residential service address. Now, the account doesn't necessarily have to be in your name, but the address, your residential address, must match what's on your vehicle registration. Applications must be submitted within 180 days of the purchase or lease. And additionally, please note that only one rebate is allowed per customer or household. So this program is a great way to make electric vehicles more affordable and accessible for our community. If you're interested in learning more about the program or applying, you can visit the website listed on our presentation. And I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the great presentations. So we have a few minutes for questions. If you want to put them in the chat or raise your hand. I do want to, one question for Bailey, knowing it's an active program where we're supporting One Tribe and pursuing the Fast Charge California rebates right now. Is there a way to track how much of the funding is available and left? And SGIP has it where you can check on a daily basis or a weekly basis at least and see how much has been drawn down. Is there that information available, or did you have a sense of how much is available right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have an active tracker. We'll be tracking the kind of live view of application status once the window is closed on where people are, if they're reserved, if they're paid and all that. But with the existing available funds, we do not have that as a tracker. But at the beginning of this week, we had approximately $14 million reserved thus far. So that leaves the remaining approximately $40 million available. But as I mentioned, it is first come, first serve, and we are processing applications as they come in. So depending on how many big applications come in, small applications come in, and eligible applications, the number can change very quickly. So we do have a buffer of available funds still. And so don't be discouraged from applying. We do have a wait list as well that we'll have for approximately 6 months after the application window closes. So anyone, if we do run out of funds, if they are eligible and they apply before October 29th, they can get put on this wait list. And if there's any cancellations within the next 6 months, they can get infilled for that. So if you have any ready site, we do encourage you to apply regardless.
Great. We have one question from anybody before I think the other room is going to kind of join us. Serena, are you managing that? Any questions for any of our speakers? I found that all, very, very informative. Luzita, is that how you say it? I apologize. Are there similar programs in other, for Edison and PG&E?
Currently, there is still the SCE for SCE and PG&E, yes.
Okay. Great. I think, Serena, it is time to bring the other group back. Do I just close the room? Or is everybody back now? All right, I'm going to.
Gosh, I think Serena's in the other breakout room.
Okay. Let's see. Austin, could you, okay, I'll break out to close at 59 seconds. All right, well, yeah, so, I guess in terms of actually staying up to date on how much funding is available, Bailey, like, can we contact you, to kind of get updates on that?
Yeah, oh, for sure. We are happy to. We have the Cali VIP at energycenter.org. That is monitored by our operations team. So if anyone wants to get any questions, status of, hey, is there funding available? You could email that and then we can get a number back to you. We're happy to let you know if you inquire, but we just don't have a place where you can publicly look for it.
And April, are you aware of any other kind of funding opportunities that weren't covered by CALSTART or CSE that people should have their eyes on?
Yeah, no, I think you covered them. Probably just in addition would be each of the either fleet rebate programs or any other utility programs that are available, and just checking with your local utility, because almost all of them have some type of infrastructure program available now.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to welcome you here to the breakout for the Tribal Climate Health Project. So this will be the third time that we have done this. This is a third now in a series that we are calling Climate Resilience in a Changing World. The purpose of this breakout, this part of the webinar series, is to integrate climate and health adaptation work with non-climate fields, meaning we don't always have to call what we're doing climate change in order to do the work to build tribal resilience to climate change, especially these days. We are hoping to collaborate and train across disciplines to strengthen our adaptation work. Basically, what can we learn from all these adjacent fields doing the work to adapt to climate change and build resilience? And how do we work with them more closely? And in better understanding the biggest hurdles in implementing our climate adaptation goals, particularly in these sort of more difficult times. This is the schedule we have going. So the, last time when we met, we were talking about.
We're not, Angie, sorry to interrupt, but we're just seeing an open PowerPoint screen, not the slides.
Okay, hang on. Oh, you're right. The one. Oh, good.
There we go. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Teamwork. Okay, teamwork makes the dream work. So last time when we got together, we were talking about tribal climate adaptation through environmental protection. So let's go back to basics. How can we continue the work of tribal climate resilience through good old-fashioned environmental protection? Last time we talked about it through the lens of land stewardship with Strategic Growth Council and some other speakers. This time we're talking about it through the lens of air and water. So you all are doing a lot of air and water work. How are you continuing to do that work? How can that help you build tribal resilience to climate change in an environment where it's getting more difficult to do climate change work? Okay, so that's kind of the goal of today. We have some great speakers and I'm going to introduce in a moment, but our agenda for this session is to just do a quick overview of air and water and the landscape and how things are changing among federal government changes and some stuff here at the state. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with these three great panelists. After we have the conversation, we're going to go into a group discussion where you can ask questions and we have some questions for you. So a lot of this is around peer knowledge exchange. We want to hear from you, like, what are your experiences? What practices are working? How are you continuing to pursue the work of climate resilience through the lens of air and water? And so we're so fortunate to have some great speakers, I'm, like I said, introduce in just a moment, but I did want to set the stage here for just a moment. A brief reminder, if you've participated with the Tribal Climate Health Project over the last 9 years, we use this framework here, this little diagram, quite a bit. It's how we talk about how climate change affects a lot of things, how it has cascading effects, and it has a lot of effects on air and water. So the primary exposures you see at the top there: temperature extremes, wildfire, storms and flooding, drought, melting ice and sea level rise. They all trigger certain secondary exposures. And those secondary exposures include worsened air quality, and water insecurity. But they present themselves in all sorts of different ways. So the kinds of things we think about when we think about climate impacts to air and water, we usually, I've done a lot of adaptation plans, we've done a lot of trainings, we hear from tribes that they are affected by things like obviously smoke. So wildfire might create more smoke. Drought might contribute to dust and particulate matter. PM 2.5 levels increase. We see greater levels of ozone that might be triggered by higher levels of heat. We see indoor mold that might be a result from storms and flooding. We see seasonality changes and heat prompting different levels of allergens and pollen in the air, which is all of these things affecting health. We also see a lot of effects to water, including water insecurity that might look like water contamination. Here's a diagram, a small one on the right, I think that comes from the National Climate Assessment, just talking about, runoff. If you have storms, you're going to have a lot of runoff that might be contributing to contamination. It might look like nitrates. It might look like an algal bloom. It might look like livestock runoff. So all sorts of things that might be contributing to contamination. And then we also see effects to supply. So that might look like a direct effect of drought and lower precipitation levels, or it might look like, hey, our water treatment center has gone down because we had a catastrophic fire or flood, and so there's infrastructure that's affecting the availability of supply. So those are the kinds, I just want to put those things in your head because we want to look around this issue to say, well, climate change is obviously exacerbating these things, but all of these things are things that your existing air and water work may be able to continue to make progress on. Okay, Shaz, I wanted to hand off to you for just a moment, just for some opening remarks before I introduce our panel.
Okay, thanks, Angie, and thank you again, everyone, for being here. I'm not going to take much time because we have some good folks who are going to talk about their experiences and their expertise. But if you work in the tribal space or if you work with tribes from an agency perspective or with an organization, then you know that there's so much that all of us are dealing with, but tribes in particular have to struggle with the impacts of climate change and air and water. How long can you live without water? Maybe, I don't want to try this, but not very long, but you can live less long without air. Not that our air quality is so bad that you literally can't breathe, but even if you're breathing, there's stuff that's coming in with your breath, and it's a lot to be prepared for. And those of us who are tribal environmental directors, and even more people who are members of tribal communities, have to worry about these things. But we're in a difficult time right now just because there's a lot of uncertainty at the federal government about how these impacts are going to be managed or even recognized. At the impacts on tribes, the impacts on the United States, the impacts on the world. So we want to hear from our panelists. Rob Roy, a good friend of mine and a great colleague from La Jolla, to talk about things from the tribal perspective, and Martha Guzman, who I'm so excited that you are here, Martha, former EPA Region 9 administrator, and still out there doing the good work. And then Nate, I've never met you. No, yes, I have. I recognize your face. But I'm glad you're here too. But we want to hear from you guys, so I'm just gonna stop there. And Angie, I don't know if you had any more formal introduction or if we just want to let you all take it away.
Well, yeah, I will. So I've provided some questions in advance to these guys. What we think we do is just kind of hand off a couple questions to each of our speakers. But thank you so much for being here. We're going to start with Martha Guzman Aceves. So she was former EPA administrator, PUC commissioner, has had 25 years of working in federal and various levels of policy on this stuff. And we're so thankful that you're here to share some perspectives with us. So we want to start with you. In the last Trump administration, there was plenty of challenges, but traditional air and water as part of environmental protections were maybe less directly affected. Maybe, and you can tell me whether or not that you feel like that's true, or if we're seeing things be more affected these days. But can you just give us a lay of the land? What are the major changes you're seeing coming out of the EPA, both on policy and funding? How are they impacting tribes? What do you think tribes expect in the next couple of years?
Thanks, Angie, and great to see you, Shasta, Rob, everybody. I see a lot of familiar names, not too many faces popping up yet, but it's great to see everyone. Yeah, this time around is horrifically worse. They learned from the first time and came prepared. So I'm not going to talk too much about the policy, but of course, you know, on the policy side, they've rolled back a few maximum contaminant levels on the drinking water side, including PFAS. They have removed and obviously some of this is still in litigation, but they've removed the endangerment finding, which is a clause that allows for us to really regulate greenhouse gases more holistically. They have repealed the waivers through Congress. And I think we all know a lot of the dynamic is that this time around they hold, you know, full control of Congress and functionally the Supreme Court. So that's why they have been so successful in their dismantling. I am going to put in the chat their proposed budget for the 2026 budget year. And you can check that out at your own leisure. I'll give you two top lines here. Overall, they're slashing the EPA. They're proposing a 50% cut, essentially, or 54% reduction in EPA funding, which doesn't just impact infrastructure. It obviously impacts enforcement and regulation. And I just want to note, this is a 50% cut to the base funding. So minus IRA, minus bill, which, you know, we had hoped as part of the Biden administration to set as a new baseline for funding infrastructure and air projects. But nonetheless, the other top line I'll give you is that for the most part, if I'm being fair, the tribal programs are not butchered. And there's a couple of things that you can look at. For example, one of the biggest things that they're cutting to make such a deep reduction in the EPA budget are the state revolving funds, which I'm sure Nate is very familiar with, the clean water and the state water revolving funds. And you guys may remember we had a couple of victories internally within the Biden team when we augmented the tribal formula that particularly benefited Region 9 because it became need-based. So the SRF had become the vehicle to really establish a larger tribal set aside. They have gone away with that and they're proposing I don't know if this is an old program, some of you may know, called the Indian Reservation Drinking Water Program. So that's one highlight. GAP seems to be, the General Assistance Program seems to be fairly consistent, maybe a few 100,000 short, but overall, I think a lot of the general assistance for governing is gone away, which is going to impact your air and water regulatory programs. That kind of softer money is being eliminated. But there is a moment here, even with such a difficult Congress, but many of you live in bipartisan areas that you can have impact. So there is a moment here to impact this budget, further augment. I mean, these programs have always been underfunded, even with the bill and IRA boosts. Many of these programs didn't get the full boost or sufficient amount. Yeah, so I will say, I think that's kind of the high level, you know, opportunity to impact the budget now. It's really actually, if anybody looking at all the different programs, you know, the tribal programs are not eliminated. Now, for Region 9, this is all kind of behind the scenes, so it's hard to know, but the last update I had, there are still 19 staff, I think 7 of which were working on the GAP administration and other elements of tribal assistance are being let go. I forget the terminology they're using, but that is a big impact, is the human resource behind this funding is being eliminated in Region 9. So yeah, I don't know, Angie, if you want me to get into more of those details, but it is gloom. You're very fortunate to be in California where we have partners like the State Water Board and the state legislature and the governor who want to do what they can to make up these holes and these regulations. So I think there's a lot of creativity there, including with some of your other breakouts like the California Public Utilities Commission. So those are all great opportunities in the interim, but the work is obviously going to continue. But fortunately for the EPA side, the current proposed budget is okay on the, I'll say on the infrastructure side, but really bad on the planning side for subsidizing some of the regulatory programs that you may have.
Thank you, Martha. I want to encourage everybody in the chat or in the breakout to put anything in the chat that you want to ask Martha. We're going to go through these questions and then we're going to have discussion. So we'll pull from those questions at the end and we have more to talk through. But thank you for that, Martha. We kind of structured this conversation with a little bit of despair in mind. So we're going to face the facts here on the federal front here first, but we do have speakers that are going to talk to us about. Rob, you're next. We're going to talk a little bit about how tribes are continuing to persevere in this work. And then we've got Nate from the state who's going to talk to us a little bit about state level opportunities like Prop 4 and other things, hopefully some hope. So let's go to Rob next. So Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Rob is with the La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians and has continued to make big progress. And so the question I have for you, Rob, first is just what are you experiencing in terms of the changes at the federal level? Have you already, do you know these cuts are coming? Are you preparing for them? How are you continuing to build tribal climate resilience at La Jolla through your air and water initiatives?
Sure, that sounds good, Angie. Thank you very much. And hello, Martha and everybody else, all my relations, all my friends and colleagues out there. Hello, welcome to you all. It's good to see everybody. And thank you very much for asking me to be part of this panel discussion with such wonderful other folks. So experiencing in terms of changes at the federal level, well, and then, how are we continuing to build our climate resilience at La Jolla through air and water initiatives and just in general, and then some of the promising ways forward that I might, suggest to share with other folks. So I think having a really good framework, a really good foundation is really important. And several years ago, I know that you probably won't be able to see this very well with, the screen up there, but this is, a quick photo or a quick image of the adaptation plan, the La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians adaptation plan. And so I worked with our amazing colleague, Amber Paris. Several years ago, back in 2019, we put together this living document of, ideas around adaptation. And we've been using that as a framework and a guide to help guide us forward. And then we actually, a couple of years ago, we wanted to add on to this and kind of build upon this. And I worked with our amazing colleagues, Sarah Diefendorf and Elaine McCarty from the Climate Collaborative, what used to be the EFC West. And we got together with all of our tribal leadership and all of our department managers here at La Jolla, and we looked again at all of our potential climate vulnerabilities, and we kind of did that risk and vulnerability assessment. And then we developed a number of new ideas of things of how we could move forward with adapting, to our changing climate. And so I think having a really good framework in there is very, very important. But I kind of wanted to start off with that because I like having that foundation and that really guides me to this day. But specifically, Angie, you had asked about, changes, what are we experiencing at the federal level and how we're continuing to build our climate resilience. Well, a couple of years ago, we applied for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Martha Guzman spoke just a little bit about the IRA in her comments. And so we received a planning grant in the amount of $400,000 to start putting together preliminary and comprehensive climate action plans. Well, then we used that preliminary climate action plan to apply for additional funding to implement. And we were very fortunate, and La Jolla collaborated with San Pasqual on this. John Flores of San Pasqual, who I've known for a number of years, actually hired him here at La Jolla, and then he moved on to San Pasqual a number of years ago. But we really continue to collaborate to this day. And I hope that you notice that word there, collaboration, because that's something I'm going to keep referring to. And so we collaborated and with the Center for Sustainable Energy, a very well-regarded organization in the climate field, and we put together a funding proposal to EPA, and we were fortunate enough to receive $22.8 million to implement our preliminary climate action plan. And we're still working to develop our comprehensive climate action plan. Well, very shortly after receiving that funding, what happened? New administration changed over. What happened there? Funding freeze. So our IRA funds were all frozen. Additionally, we had also applied for, under the Clean Air Act, there was an IRA Clean Air Act funding opportunity. And we applied for and received it. I think it was about $140,000, $160,000, something like that, in that program to further build out our air monitoring program. And EPA had awarded treatment as it's formerly called treatment in a manner similar to a state, oftentimes just highlighted as TAS or treatment as a state, where federally recognized Indian tribes can receive that same treatment as states to be able to administer different sections of the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act in this case. And so we had applied for it and were awarded our TAS under the Clean Air Act. And we, subsequent to that, we had engaged in a formal consultation with EPA and spoke about our concerns about ozone monitoring and other air quality monitoring in the region, and how very few tribes actually had the funding to continue their air monitoring programs, and that most of the air monitoring that was occurring was being done by the San Diego Air Pollution Control District, and all that was happening in the western part of the county, pretty much from I-15 to the west. Where are tribes located? I-15 to the east. And so very little monitoring was being done in tribal communities. And so we strongly advocated for additional funding to go to tribes to expand their air quality and water quality monitoring programs. And we were actually given the opportunity for our ozone monitoring program to become a regulatory monitoring program. So our ozone data that we collect is going to be used for regulatory purposes by EPA to make formal decisions about the air quality in the region. And so we felt that that was a very strong accomplishment in our air program, was to receive that TAS and then to move forward, receive the ability to have regulatory ozone monitoring. Well, also that IRA Clean Air Act grant was frozen. So we reached out to our congressional representatives. Darrell Issa is a Republican representative from California for the district where we are. Reached out to him, and actually our tribal leaders went back to Washington, D.C. And that's something that we talk about in our tribal communities an awful lot, and at our regional tribal operations committee meetings, about getting our tribal leaders involved and actually conducting advocacy, meeting with our congressional representatives. And I'm so thankful to our La Jolla chairman, Chairman Wesley Rios Jr., and our tribal council, because they actually went back to Washington, D.C., met with Darrell Issa in his office, met with other folks back there, and got our congressman on our side. He wrote a letter to Administrator Lee Zeldin at EPA, advocating for our funds to be released. And I don't know if that's what did it, but not too long after that, our funds were released. So I think really getting our tribal leadership involved and to get those funds released was critically important. And then continuing on that, there have been multiple opportunities to be able to respond to many of the actions that the new administration is moving forward. As Martha gave us a bit of a summary of some of the actions that the administration is taking. And she talked about the impacts to EPA, and while there very fortunately was not a financial hit to EPA's Indian General Assistance Program, Unfortunately, about 75% of the GAP project officers at EPA Region 9 were facing their reduction in force and potentially losing their jobs. And so I worked with our tribal leadership and our tribal attorney, and we put together a letter to Administrator Zeldin, and we took his 5 points. Administrator Zeldin put out 5 pillars. I'm sorry, not points, 5 pillars that he wanted to base his EPA administration on. Well, it was a little bit challenging, honestly, trying to find ways that we could really speak to all 5 of those points. Yes, Martha, it was quite challenging, especially point number 5, but we did our best. And we put together a letter to Administrator Zeldin highlighting each of the 5 pillars. I keep saying points. Each of the 5 pillars and how the GAP program is essential to helping EPA achieve their goals in those 5 pillars, and that without GAP project officers there to support the tribes in their work, then we're really going to have a degraded GAP program. So those are some of the ways that we've really been working to try to make some changes at the federal level and to continue to build our climate resilience program at La Jolla. I mentioned the word collaboration earlier. So last week I was at the Tribal Lands and Environment Forum back in Minnesota, meeting with tribes from all across the nation, and EPA's Office of Land and Emergency Management is the one, along with a steering committee that I sit on, the Tribal Waste and Response Steering Committee. We collaborate together and we work to host, put on this conference each year. I actually was on a session discussion with staff from EPA and staff from the Indian Health Service. And our discussion was collaboration, working with the federal government to achieve success. And I just think that, like this tech, group here, this is a collaboration. We have many amazing partners. And I always say, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to do it on your own. Many people have done similar work that we're trying to do right now before. We can learn from them. We can build upon work of others. We can, I think that we should foster to build strong collaborative efforts. And I think that's how we're going to get through the next 3.5 more years going forward, is through our partnerships and through our collaborations with others, because with more people, we are stronger. I'm sorry, I didn't say that quite right, but I think, it has, when we stand together, we stand stronger. And so that's, I think, a critically important point going forward. Angie, I could sit here and talk for an hour or so about other air and water things that we're doing at La Jolla, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Give Nate a chance to get in and give people a chance to ask some questions. But please let me know if you need anything else from me.
Thank you, Rob. Nothing makes me happier than to see communities fight and win. So I'm excited that you get to continue some of that work, and thanks for all your leadership here. Nate, we're on to you. So this is a conversation we wanted to have. Our last speaker before we open up for some discussion. So Nate Blacksmith is with the California State Water Board. We asked for them. We have, we like our state water board. They've been good partners with Tribal Climate Health Project in the past. We know you have a lot going on. So my question for you was, California is largely continuing their climate policies, but has had some budget challenges. Tell us a little bit about the opportunities tribes can take advantage of through the California State Water Board to continue addressing climate resilience, drought, and other water-related climate impacts.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be here with everybody. And thank you for the question. And of course, Martha and Rob, thank you so much for the background. Federal funding hasn't been drastically impacted, as Martha alluded to, but we're facing a great deal of uncertainty on some of the actions that we've seen so far, just, on the federal level in general. And for the most part, our federal partners echo the same sentiment. In the face of that uncertainty, our efforts don't stop. We're here to highlight a couple funding programs and opportunities. And to do that, I want to introduce my colleague, Jeff Wetzel, just to speak a little bit about, our funding programs and maybe highlight an update on Prop 4. Jeff, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Nate. And good morning, everybody. So Jeff Wetzel, also with the State Water Board. I am in the Division of Financial Assistance, and then the program that I specifically work in is the Safer Drinking Water Program. So hopefully you guys have heard about that over the years. And the Safer Drinking Water Program basically doesn't have one funding source, but it has it's an umbrella program with lots of funding sources that we utilize to basically administer this drinking water grant funding to help systems with a wide variety of solutions. And then recently, the program kind of kicked off in 2020. It was really focused on what we called like the failing systems or water systems that are unsafe to drink. And just recently, we were really focused on only those systems, but we've broadened that eligibility a little bit to what we call the at-risk systems that have some criteria that are concerning, and we feel that we should address those. And then to talk about some of the funding specifically, so I think the most important one to mention is the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. So that started in 2020, basically, and we get around $130 million each year for 10 years. So we are kind of at the halfway point here. And the real important thing to mention with that funding source is a couple things. It's continuously appropriated. So we get it each year and we know it's coming, so we can plan for it. And it doesn't necessarily have a liquidation date. We hold on to it till we use it, which is great. And then the other really good thing about Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund is that it can help a wide variety of entities and for a wide variety of solutions. So tribes, obviously being one of them, is an eligible funding recipient. But we can also do a lot of different solutions. We can do your traditional planning and construction type projects. We can also do interim support and emergency support if needed, as well as some other unique ones like operation and maintenance support to water systems and or tribes. And then also administrator support where there's just not a local management of that water system and needs to have an administrator appointed to kind of lead the charge. So those are some of the really important things to mention. Also within the SAFER program is the Prop 4 funding, which I heard mentioned here. We also have the state revolving fund under that SAFER program umbrella. So for Prop 4, as we know, that was passed and there was some kinks to be worked out. I'm not plugged into all those little kinks, but I know the State Water Board is getting some allocations year by year going forward as we need it. I don't think our capacity can handle all that money at once. So there's discussions to kind of roll it out year by year so we can use it. There was a tribal set aside in there for drinking water projects of 25 million. And from what I hear from my fiscal folks, we get about half of that this fiscal year, so around 11 or 12. And then we get the other half of that next fiscal year. So that is good and promising. To talk a little bit, I think also just about some of our recent efforts with tribes and where we've seen kind of a pretty good impact is that we kind of have these unique funding sources or unique solutions. So we've been able to kind of fill the gap or fill the need in some specific situations. So there was one tribe that has a project, kind of a long-term solution project with US EPA, and they're working on that. But they have a whole bunch of what we call point of use treatment devices, and they're having a hard time just maintaining those and paying an operator to do that in the interim before the long-term construction project takes place. So with the flexibility of the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund to do operation and maintenance, we were able to give or work with that tribe to get them a 3-year grant to support operation and maintenance of those treatment devices until their long-term solution comes into play. So I think that was a good fit and kind of just filling a need that we heard. And then the other one I'll mention too is filling funding shortfalls. So there was we have a project with the UROC where they're doing a new water tank. And then at the end of the day, and went out to construction, the project was a little bit more than imagined. And so they worked with us and we kind of filled the gap on those cost overruns per se, or just the escalated construction cost to kind of fill that gap of that need. So I think those are the big things to mention for our funding programs. And I'm happy to chime back in when Nate's done.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And then just want to mention a couple other opportunities for tribes at this time. So climate and resilience projects, tribes can assess water supply, drying of domestic wells, limited surface water or seawater intrusion, and consider identifying long-term infrastructure solutions for drinking and wastewater projects, such as new wells, regional consolidations, new tanks, distribution system improvements, and water region with OPEDA, which is the office I'm with, and DFA to discuss and determine project eligibility and support. The next one would be the Swamp Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program. Water boards are always seeking more tribal participation and monitoring water quality, harmful algal blooms, and groundwater levels. Bioaccumulation monitoring continues to be aligned with the public's need, particularly in areas important for subsistence by traditionally underrepresented communities, as well as tribal traditions, culture, and substance. And then the last one is the Tribal Beneficial Use Designation Program. Tribal Beneficial Use programs provide a water quality safety measure that considers the specific uses of water by individuals, households, or communities of California tribes. And there are three designation types: tribal, traditional, and cultural, tribal subsistence fishing, which is TSUB, and then subsistence fishing. And you can reach out to your local regional water board tribal coordinator to set up a time to meet and discuss those beneficial uses efforts and timeframes with your region. It's a bit of a process, but those are the three opportunities that I want to highlight for this group this morning.
Thank you so much. I feel better. Do you? It's nice to see that there are some opportunities. Thank goodness for California. I will say on Prop 4, I am sticking my nose in places it doesn't belong as usual. So like the one thing to look out for right now, there's budget trailer bills, budget junior bills. The legislature is working on its spending appropriations. There was a moment the Assembly was thinking of not appropriating any more Prop 4 dollars this year. Sounds like it might be back on, but what we need to look out for is those dollars being used for general fund deficits. A real possibility because we're having a struggling budget year here in California. So more to come on that, but we hope that those appropriations come through. This year we start seeing some relief. And it sounds like to me, if I'm looking across what all of you guys have said, it's a decent year for water infrastructure projects, a decent time in the next couple of years to maybe that's a focus area. And really cool that there's even funds for stopgaps, funding for plans and supplies. That's really cool. So the questions in the chat have been pretty minor and are getting addressed. One of the questions was, hey, all these great programs at the State Water Board, how do we access that? And maybe we can work with you directly can we write something up so we can get some information out on how folks take advantage of all of these things and we can help distribute? Would that work?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. So let's turn it over to a little bit of discussion now. And folks can feel free to raise your hand here in the crowd. This is sort of discussion for either our panelists or our audience. I think you all know, if you're working for a tribe, you know what your threats are to air and water quality. And the main question here is just how are you finding pathways forward to continuing to plug away at those air quality and water security threats? Love to hear more examples from around the state, or maybe Rob, this is a chance for you to share anything else you might be thinking about.
Looking for Eddie, Rob. I was going to put him on the spot for you, but he must have gone to the other one.
Well, yeah, we certainly do continue to work, so our climate pollution reduction grant is a 5-year project. We're only, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months or so into that right now. And so we definitely continue to work on that. And we're doing all sorts of fantastic measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and do all sorts of fantastic renewable energy projects that are going to benefit not only our tribal members, but, the tribe as a whole. But something that I'm actually embarking on right now, I'm working with BIA and Bureau of Reclamation. I've had this concern for a number of years that the aquifer that underlies La Jolla has never been really studied or monitored. And so, that was kind of our focus of our talk was supposed to be kind of around air and water. And so I just wanted to mention that, I'm collaborating with these other agencies and working to bring in some funding. And we've hired an engineering firm to work with us. And I'm trying to put together a water resources plan to look out to 2050, about 25 years out into the future, to really, to look at our changing climate, changing weather patterns, how that's going to affect our aquifer, as there's a lot more growth in the area, more people using more water all the time. And then the tribe, has more people moving back onto the tribal reservation, and we're trying to work on building up our own economic development. So I'm trying to collaborate with BIA and Reclamation and to put together this water resources plan to really understand, are we going to have the water that we need here at La Jolla looking out, a couple generations out in, to 2050? And if not, well, then what are we going to do about it? And those water resource projects, to try to get a new, pipeline connected into here is going to take quite a few years and quite a lot of money. You really need to start on it early. So that's why we're trying to do that initial project right now.
Thanks, Rob. And I actually have a question for Martha. And I don't know what you're up to these days, but you're obviously still up to good trouble, and you're here. So I wonder if there's any other advice you would give tribes to be ready for when we hopefully have a change in the administration's priorities and can start
absolutely
working with them.
Absolutely. I think well, one thing you said earlier, Shasta, is that we're dealing with these realities whether they want to admit it or not. These realities are here, and we have to continue with that. I think there's a couple of things I did want to mention, similar to Rob, in terms of, keeping our network strong, learning from each other, learning about these opportunities to continue the work. So when we come back together, and I wanted to say there's a couple networks right now. The Environmental Protection Network, I'll put a link in there, which is largely made up of alumni of EPA. They're a little more hawkish on knowing the budget process and things like that. So they're good allies to have. And Environmental Defense Fund is also putting some resources to fighting for a budget. So that's kind of on the interim here. I do want to note also that Jeff mentioned some of the benefits of the SAFER program's current continuous appropriation. Well, unfortunately, that's coming from the cap and trade program, which is being renegotiated as we speak, including the potential to renegotiate some of those continuous appropriations. So I know everybody's busy, but it's very important to let your local electeds know at the state level that these resources are important to retain, including the SAFER program. So, in terms of, I just got back this weekend. I was able to participate up in Shasta with Winnemem Wintu in reintroducing salmon, trying to reintroduce salmon into the McLeod. And there was an auntie there who kind of spoke to this tenacity that they have, that they are continuing to do the work regardless of what's happening in DC. And, like everything they're doing is actually a great amount of progress. And the state has a big role in making that progress possible. So
Martha, I'm so sorry. I just want to let you know the breakout's going to close us out in 30 seconds.
Okay, so just focus locally, focus on those partnerships that are working. And for a lot of you, some of those include the federal partnerships. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Martha, Rob, Nate, for participating today. Thanks everybody for a good conversation. You will get the materials after this event. We're going to wrap up for the next couple of minutes in the full room with everybody, do a little report out and tell you what's coming next. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. It looks like we have everybody joined us back into the main room. So let me scroll to the final slides, I guess, or is that?
Oh, no, let's just look at this gorgeous little Hobbit village.
So I guess I'll, key takeaways from ours is there's funding available. If you want one for your personal vehicle, you got to act fast, but you can also get it for used vehicles. up to, a minimum of $1,000 if you're in any of the IOU territories. There's a lot of resources that were shared, and I think April did a great job of really walking us through the steps and considerations of both considering fleet transition, installing EV infrastructure, and considering even opening up a fleet EV charging hub that could be a great economic driver opportunity for your community. Shasta or Angie, you want to do the takeaways on yours?
Well, as expected, ours was better. But watch the recording and you'll understand why next time we are going to stay in the main room and we're going to make y'all go to the breakout room. We had some great presentations and words from our panelists, Rob Roy, Nate Blacksmith, and Martha Guzman, about what we can look forward to, and some actually it's not all bad news in the air and water space for tribes, but really just making that push for keeping up with the work and advocating and working with your elected officials and doing what you can to push the administration to do the right thing by tribes.
Yeah, we got to keep fighting the good fight, and overall resilience, beyond climate resilience and energy resilience is necessary right now. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here to present these opportunities to you and to hold this space, keep this forum. We appreciate you all taking the time. We hope this will be something that is kind of ongoing for many years to come, and building out these resources. So we'll actually end a minute early. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. The next TECC-X will be on October 28th. The next Tribal Climate Health Project webinar will be focused on energy. You guys are kind of stealing our thunder there. Maybe we'll get some higher numbers there. And the tech topic is TBD. Maybe we'll do water next time around. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.